Okay, so the Dominaria United full spoiler is out. I am really, really hyped. This is the first time in like 5 or 6 months that we are getting new cards into the modern format. And usually I'll just do like a Twitter post talking about cards that I think are interesting, and then I'll dive deep into those cards on stream for a few weeks, try to find the best shell for them. But I'm really excited because I haven't gotten to play with new cards in a long time. And there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, and I thought it would be good to do a more deeper dive, do a YouTube video talking about all of the new interesting cards coming to Modern. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to make this introduction too long. We can just dive into it. I wanted to put these four cards first. These are the four cards that I am most excited for. Oh, my Goku's not playing. There we go. These are the four cards I'm most excited for, and particularly Leyline Binding is going to be my kind of number one pick for the set. I know that's kind of like clickbaity. No, don't look at these. This kind of clickbaity nonsense. Number one card from the set, but this card is crazy. I think this card is crazy. This is a instant speed Oblivion Ring effect that if you can meet the domain requirements and have 5 lands, all 5 land types in play, easily achievable in a format with fetch lands, triumphs, and shock lands. This is a 1 mana instant speed Oblivion Ring, which can answer any non-land permanent. And someone earlier this week asked me, isn't there already an instant speed Oblivion Ring cast out? But just think if you had any 4 mana spell in Magic, and that card just costs 1 mana, albeit conditionally, but that condition is pretty easy to meet in Modern. A 1 mana a 1 mana version of a 4 mana spell is super duper exciting. And specifically Leyline Binding, I think is going to be I think it's going to slot right into 3 decks, 3 existing powerful Modern decks. It's going to be very good in Rhinos, where it's a 6 mana permanent that lets you answer any non-land permanent, which has always been an issue for Rhinos, is like lacking that premium removal that meets your deck building restriction. It's not that hard to splash white in Rhinos. You get access to Solitude, to Fairy Time Raveler if you want it, Omnath, Ardent Plea. You can play Yorion, you cannot play Yorion. I think that you are going to see Rhinos decks going forward playing white and playing 4 Leyline Bindings, splashing it off of like 1 Triumph. And I think it's going to be very, very good. I also think Leyline Binding slots really well into the 4-color Omnath deck, and I think it slots well into blue-white control as well. I think it's not that hard for blue-white control to play a Triumph, then 2 off-color shock lands, or you might want to play around with the mana base a little bit, but I expect you to do something like play Jeskai Triumph and then have a Breeding Pool and a Watery Grave in your deck or something like that. Card is really, really good. I think it also like can fit into a lot of other existing shells, like Enchantress. It goes Enchantress. You can play in your Enigmatic Incarnation deck. I think maybe like Reanimator variants may be interested in this because it can get rid of opposing graveyard hate while also just being a good card. But I digress a little. Like again, it's just a good card. And one lesson that I've learned from brewing and deck building in Modern a lot is when you get a new good removal spell, like you get a Prismatic Ending, you get a Leyline Binding, you don't need to like sweat it too much, because at the end of the day, you can't really brew around a removal spell. This one's like a little different because it's like an enchantment that like meets like Cascade deck building requirements. But for the most part, it's not a card you build around. It's a card that fits into existing strategies, and I'm pretty excited for it. I'm also very excited for Soul of Windgrace. This is a 4-mana Jund Legend, 5/4 creature. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can put a land card from any graveyard into play under your control tapped. And then you also have like Kinrith Return King type abilities where you can discard a land, gain 3, discard a land, draw a card, discard a land, give it indestructible in Jund colors. And I think this card fits super duper well into the Jund Saga deck, where you have a plethora of lands in your hand a lot of time with Written 6, and having a way to discard those and use them for value is nice. Giving you card advantage on Into the Battlefield trigger and attack trigger is really exciting, and you can return, most notably, just Urza Saga for some value the turn it comes down. I don't think that this is a card that's going to like make Jund Saga a tier 1 deck, but Jund Saga has been like a fringe playable, totally reasonable deck to choose that has like a pretty good matchup against the format as a whole and like kind of can't beat the Omnath deck. And Windgrace doesn't like fix that problem, but I do think it's a pretty big upgrade for the archetype. And then speaking of other good upgrades for the archetype, Aether Channeler is like Leyline Binding is my pick for the best card in the set. Aether Channeler is maybe the card that like I'm the most excited about because I've been playing a lot of this Bant Collected Company deck with Soul Herder. You've probably seen it on the YouTube channel or stream or Channel Fireball, or your friends are playing it at FNM maybe. And this card is just, I think, a perfect fit for the deck where you're a Collected Company deck, so you really want 3-mana creatures that synergize with your Flicker cards, Soul Herder and Ephemerate. And this card is just so flexible, and it's so flexible, giving you board presence, interaction, or card advantage. And I think I'm very excited to just like jam 4 in the Bant Collected Company deck and hope that it's as good as I think it is. And then another card I'm really excited for, and I think is going to be very good in both modern, in both modern and Pioneer, is Founding the Third Path. I think the read ahead ability is very important for this card to be good, but this is kind of like a Snapcaster Mage or Mission Briefing variant where it costs you 2 mana initially, and then you get to cast a spell later. But what's cool about this card is that it gives you that 2 mana back if you have a 2 mana spell in your hand to play. So you play it, you can play a different 2 mana spell, so it kind of gives you that mana back. And then ideally you are either milling yourself for value, or you're playing a mill deck and you're milling your opponent for value. And then you can choose any card in your graveyard to cast and accrue some value. I think this card is exciting for Reanimator. I think this card is exciting for Mill, and I think this card could fit in a few different more Fringe strategies. It has some synergy with See the Truth also, where you can get See the Truth unstuck from your hand, and then you can flash it back, drawing 3 cards. I think that could be an interesting card to pair it with. Let's go ahead and go to the next cards. I know that these are really the talk of the town, and I'm excited for them too. I wanted to put these 3 lords in their own category because I think that they are very similar. I think that they are going to be impactful to the format. And I think they are going to be a big buff to obviously goblins, elves, and merfolk. All decks that are, people like to play them. I really like to play elves and goblins specifically. So here's one thing I kind of predict. I think that Horde Master is going to be the best of the 3. But that's because Goblins is the best tribal deck in Modern and is very slept on. I've spent a lot of time working on Goblins. I broke the all-time trophy record in Modern with like Goblins as like a deck that was getting they got me like 3 trophies in 2 days or something at the very end of the race. And I think that people are going to pick up the Goblins deck in Modern now that Horde Master is being printed in the format, and they're going to kind of understand that the deck is just pretty good. It's the deck is just good and underplayed, where it is a tribal deck that's really resilient to the abundant counter magic in the format. Unlike other tribal decks, it provides a crazy amount of card advantage with cards like Goblin Matron, Goblin Ringleader, now the Horde Master, Conspicuous Snoop, Slinging Lieutenant, and this amount of card advantage can help you fight through the obnoxious anti-tribal cards that you see here. And then you also have access to a 5-mana, 2-card infinite combo with Conspicuous Snoop and Boggart Harbinger. And what's cool about that combo is that both Conspicuous Snoop and Boggart Harbinger are like reasonable cards to play in your Goblin deck. Anyway, Snoop is really good, Harbinger is like less good, but it functions without your Snoop being in play, unlike Splinter Twin, which is just a dead card if you're not comboing. You have some premium interaction with Munitions Expert. Goblins is just a good deck, and Horde Master is a nice upgrade for it, and I'm excited to play it. I think Leaf Crown Visionary reads to me like this card is crazy. Like this card is nuts. And it does provide a lot of card advantage to the Elves deck, which is maybe what it's missing to keep up with cards like Fury, Solitude, and these 2 cards with Ephemerate. I don't really predict that either Leaf Crown Visionary or Vodalian Hexcatcher are going to be the cards that Merfolk and Elves need to rise back through the ranks, although neither deck has really been in the forefront of Modern's metagame for a long time. maybe ever. Elves has been reasonable, Merfolk's been reasonable, but they've never been like top decks. But But I do think both decks are really going to want to play both, probably 4 of both for the rest of time, and it's good to see tribal decks get a buff. I'd like to see more buffs to tribal decks in Modern going forward. And so I just wanted to go over a couple of cards I think are going to be pretty good in the sideboard of Modern decks. Specifically, Temporary Lockdown and Card and Silex I think are going to be like actually played Modern cards, and then these are a couple cards I don't think I'll probably ever play these, but they're at least like worth thinking about. If there's ever a deck that's like, if there's ever like a Murktide deck that's playing Enchantresses that you care to defeat, Destroy Evil is interesting. Smash to Dust is good if there's ever like an old school affinity style strategy that is weak to the like electricity effect, and also like you want that shatter. But just something that these kind of cards pop up in like every set and can be really easy to forget them. Like these new variants of like existing sideboard cards you've seen in the past, and it's just good to like always have them on your radar. But we'll probably never play them. But the cards we will play are like Temporary Lockdown, Card and Silex. I think Temporary Lockdown, very, very good card, maybe the best card in Modern now against Hammer Time. But being double white, being 3 mana, I don't know exactly what decks are wanting to play it besides like blue-white control, but a very good card. I think Esper Reanimator may like it because it just can come down, exile like a bunch of different forms of graveyard hate too. And then Karn Silex is mostly going to be a Karn, the Great Creator tutor target, but a very good one, I think. A very good one. I think that you'll see like Amulet Titan playing this in the sideboard if they're playing Karn. Tron variants playing this. Just a very solid card. Very interesting, like Pernicious Deed variant that you can tutor. And then one cool thing about this with Karn the Great Creator is it's flavorful because it's, Karn's Silex, but also because it exiles itself, you can tutor it back. You can tutor it up again with the same Karn the Great Creator, which is kind of interesting. And then, so I think these like first 3 slides are kind of like the high tier cards for the format, and like having like 7, 8, 9 if you count these two like really exciting cards for Modern that are going to be like seeing a lot of play. That's very interesting to me. But then there's a lot of cards that are like more fringe cards that can kind of buff specific archetypes, or that these are potential tools for more fringe archetypes to explore, but are probably not going to see a lot of meaningful impact to the format, and they're probably not going to be super important, but I do think they're good to go over. One of them that I think is probably one of the better cards on this list is a Phoenix Chick. This is a 1-mana 1/1 flying haste, can't block, but if it's in the graveyard and you attack with 3 or more creatures, you can spend 2 red mana and it comes back into play attacking already with a +1 counter on it. I think this could be an interesting option for Vengevine Hollow 1 decks that are filling up their graveyard really quickly. It's a 1-mana creature to bring back your Vengevine, which is really important to have a density of those in the deck, and you can discard it for value, put some more pressure on the opponent. At the end of the day, it's not something that's like super duper powerful, so I could see the Vengevine decks not even wanting to play it, but it is an interesting option. And then Shore Up is an interesting blue protection spell if you're ever interested in playing blue protection spells. I've always kind of felt like maybe Murktide would be interested in playing like a card like Dive Down in the past. I think this is a better version of Dive Down, giving +1/+1 and untapping. Like untapping your Murktide is kind of nice. But again, just kind of fringe, card to think about, probably won't see much play. Although I think Squee Dubious Monarch is like, dubious in the name is pretty apt, where this card is really powerful. This is a card that before all this like premium exile based removal entered Modern, I would have been really excited about this, like before Prismatic Ending, before Leyline Binding, before Solitude. But 3-mana 2/2 haste, get a goblin that's attacking with it is very exciting. And then it has Escape for 4 mana. What's cool about escaping this for 4 mana is that it just like immediately you immediately get value from it, which is really important. I don't know what deck this goes in. Besides maybe goblins, maybe Jund midrange, maybe like a Rakdos Scam style deck. And I don't know that this deck card is really good against most of the best decks in the format. Decks like Omnath, decks like Murktide, maybe it's probably good against Murktide, but not that good against Hammer, not that good against Living End. But the card is really powerful. You could see some sideboard play for matchups that play a lot of non-exile based removal, but definitely a good card to keep your eye on. And then some of the other cards on the list I think are probably never going to see modern play, but I just want to put them on your radar. Where like Get to Amplifier is very similar to Kiln Fiend. They both have the same power toughness 1/2. Kiln Fiend gets +3/+0 when you cast an instant or sorcery. This gets +2/+0 instead, but it's a human wizard, so it works well with Harmonic Prodigy, and so it's a wizard. So like maybe this is in the context of Pioneer, but in the wizard you can cast like Wizard's Lightning, which is pretty important. And you do have the ability to kick her it and bounce a creature. Maybe more of a Pioneer card, maybe a card that never sees any play, but it is interesting, and I think it's worth noting. Electrostatic Infantry is a card that I like a lot. It's like kind of like a mono red Sprite Dragon, has Trample instead of Haste Flying, which is worse. Only gets counters off instants and sorceries, which is worse. But it has 2 toughness, and it's also mono red. And there is a pretty interesting mono red prowess deck that kind of feels like it's missing like one good cheap threat. And obviously, like those decks can just splash a color without too much problems, but staying mono red has its benefits, and so I think this card is potentially interesting in that deck. Could be interesting as a budget option as well. I think that Valdilian Mindsinger could be an interesting sideboard option for Merfolk. Almost nothing beyond those Merfolk synergies though, because I think this card really needs those lords to make its power bigger to steal a creature without all this extra mana investment. And then Nishiba Brawler is... I would feel remiss if I didn't talk about what is going to be a 2-mana 5/3 trample. I will say that Lightning Bolt in Modern is currently seeing a lot less play than it ever has in the format's history. So a 2-mana creature that dies to Lightning Bolt is not as big of a problem, but I don't really see this card seeing any play in Modern outside of budget decks. But I do think that you could build like a pretty interesting budget domain deck, and that's probably something I'm going to be writing about for Channel Fireball TCG Player at some point. I just wanted to note this card. One big problem I don't like about this card though is that it has Trample, and so if you're going to pair this with Scion of Draco, I believe Scion of Draco gives green creatures Trample innately, and so like you don't get any extra value with your Scion, which stinks. And then Tolarian Terror is a card that is very powerful. This is absolutely a card I think that would have seen play in Modern before Murktide Regent was printed. That being said, I think that in almost every deck in the format, this is going to be a worse option than Murktide, with one notable exception. If you build a deck with Tolarian Terror and Bedlam Reveler, Bedlam Reveler incentivizes you, is like the one card I can think of that incentivizes you to keep those instants and sorceries in the graveyard in the same way that Tolarian Terror does, instead of delving them away with Murktide Regent. And so that could also be a Pioneer option instead of Modern. The Tolarian Terror is definitely like a powerful enough card for Modern, so I want to note it. In Modern, it competes with Murktide Regent. In Pioneer, it competes with Treasure Cruise, and so the only way I see like that getting around like that competition being good is if you want to play Bedlam Reveler, which you probably don't. But I just like to go over all the cards I'm thinking about, and this is definitely one of them. Another card I'm thinking about is Weatherlight Completed. I think that this card is only going to be good in like a red-black Oni Cult Anvil type sacrifice deck with lots of like artifact-based sacrifice synergies where you can have like Oni Cult Anvil sacrifices its token every turn, Cauldron Familiar, Witch's Oven to trigger this card very, very quickly, and then potentially just playing this as like a as a Goblin Engineer tutor target for some value could be something you're interested in. It could be like a little too slow, not powerful enough, but I think like I've played some of this like Oni Cult Anvil sacrifice deck in the past. I think the deck is okay, and I think this could be like a very small upgrade for it. Then Urborg Lurgoyf is my favorite named card in the set. I think it could be interesting in that same kind of like, you know, Phoenix Chick, Vengevine, Hollow Ones type strategy that's just like a Crabvine style deck. We're just filling up your yard really quickly. And the card is giant, but I think having like no trample, and just being like a 2-mana vanilla creature effectively probably means that it's not going to see almost any play. And then one other thing to note about this Urborg Lurgoyf too is when you compare it to Tarmogoyf, Uh, you need to just play Tarmogoyf. You can play interactive spells. You can play Thoughtseize, you can play Lightning Bolt, you can play Liliana, you can play Urza Saga, and you can use these kind of interactive spells to buy time for your Tarmogoyf to win the game. Urborg Lurgoyf, you can't do that. You can't do that because you just have to play a deck that's almost entirely creatures. So I don't expect this card to see a lot of play, but it is very powerful. I wanted to note it. It is definitely a very powerful card. So just kind of wanted to at least bring it up. And then this is a page of cards that I think are not going to be good enough for Modern, but I am having a hard enough time evaluating them that I wanted to at least like bring them up. And so I'll usually have like a tier like this on my Twitter posts of cards that I would just have to like do some deck building with. I'd have to cast them once or twice just to know for sure. These are usually the kind of cards that I play test off stream and just are never good enough. But I think there's some interesting stuff going on with them. I don't want to go super far in depth into these cards because I just don't think they're that important. But I think Jai is interesting. 4-mana Planeswalker, a lot of loyalty if you plus. I think making a Monk Prowess token is really powerful. It's conditional board advantage, card advantage, creature removal for the first 3 abilities, which I think is powerful enough. You could consider this in the sideboard of a mono red Prowess deck. Sarah Paragon is a card I'm having a really hard time evaluating because I think these 4-mana creatures like cast that rely on you having cards in the graveyard to get value, and you kind of have to untap with them to be good, are usually so bad. But with Sarah Paragon, you don't really have to untap with it because you can play a land immediately, you can play a Mishra's Bauble immediately. There's lots of like, it's life gain, there's lots of powerful cards that you can recur. I think it's probably not going to be good enough, but it is a card I just need to like marinate and think about a little bit. You just have to remember this is the set is still is still very new, very fresh. It's hard to have hard opinions on everything yet. There's also Cruelty of Gix, which is a card I really like. This card is so powerful. It does so many things for 5 mana. Discards a card from your opponent's hand, casts a Grim Tutor for you, and then reanimates a creature from any graveyard. I think this card is almost definitely not going to be powerful, but I think one thing that's interesting in Modern is that 5 mana black spells can kind of play like 4 mana black spells indexed with Cabal Coffers and Urborg, because on turn 4, when you have Cabal Coffers, Urborg, 2 lands, you have 5 mana. And so I think that 5 mana black spells are a little bit at a premium. Maybe this card goes in the Cabal Coffers Urborg deck. Probably not, but I hope so because I really like it. Read Ahead is also really important on this card. I wouldn't consider it without Read Ahead. And that's another like thing too, is that the Read Ahead mechanic is I think really well designed, but I think it's making it a lot harder to evaluate these sagas because I've never played with them before. So my evaluation on like this card and then Bounding of the Third Path could change based on some playtesting too. And then Haughty Den is a really powerful card. 3 mana, star 4 flyer. Power equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your yard. Instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. Notably, this is another card that like Tolarian Terror, likes those cards, instant sorceries, to stay in your yard instead of being exiled to Murktide Regent. And I was thinking this card could be interesting in combination with specifically... oh no. It's a Phyrexian spell. It's 1 white Phyrexian, 1 mana. That gives your creature protection from any color or artifacts. I'll probably remember the name later in the video. But what's interesting is that you can play this card and then have a 0 mana protection spell up for it. And having a 0 mana protection spell for this big win condition is kind of interesting. Again, probably not good enough, but I thought that was kind of an interesting interaction. Utia Declares War could be an interesting option for our artifact-based aggro decks. This is a card I'm having a really hard time evaluating. I'm just going to need to like cast it and get out of my system. Makes an Ornithopter, can kill a creature Planeswalker with Chapter 2, and then buffs 1 artifact to 4/4 until end of turn. Radabrig of Urborg, I think, is not going to be a playable card unless there's some kind of goofy combo with it, but I think there might be an interesting combo. I just have to dig a little bit deeper into it, but it says whenever another legendary creature you control dies, make a token that's a copy of that creature except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 zombie in addition to its other types. So I think with like the blue Leyline that makes everything Leyline, I think this card does combo with that. Having Ward 2 on a combo piece is kind of nice as well, but we will see. Joint Exploration. It's kind of like a combination Preordain Growth Spiral. I think this card could end up playing a lot better than it looks, where for 2 mana, you get to instant speed Preordain, which is not that good in Modern, but the ability to like kick it and have some ramp at 3 mana, put the land into play untapped, cast a 1 mana spell. I think you could be like pleasantly surprised by this card, but I would be very surprised if it ended up seeing any Modern play. And then Micromancer is a card I really like. It is a human wizard, so pretty relevant creature types, but I think at 4 mana it's unlikely to do anything, but this is I think this is the only card in Modern that's at least only 3 or 4 mana and can tutor Ephemerate on a creature. So like the ability to like Micromancer, tutor Ephemerate your Micromancer, tutor Ephemerate, and then you can also tutor interesting interactive cards like Silence or Veil of Summer, Fatal Push. Makes the card like worth looking at and having on your radar. Again, at 4 mana, it's almost definitely way too slow, but just a card to think about. Maria is a card I would be super hyped for and excited about if it said tap 2 artifacts, not non-token artifacts. As is, I would expect this card to not see any Modern play. However, it is a very interesting card, and I think that after some deck building and looking a little bit deeper, the ability for this card to both be source of mana generation and card advantage in an artifact-based deck could be worth giving another look at. And then Urg, Spawn of Thurg, 3 mana, 5 toughness, power equal to number of lane cards in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can look at the top card and mill if you want to, and spend 2 mana to sacrifice a land, gain 2 life. Probably a little too weak. Could be interesting in like a Titania green-black deck, maybe with Elvish Reclaimer, maybe some more self-mill, Grist milling yourself. Again, probably not good enough. Just these are cards I'm just kind of thinking about. They're on my radar. I'll probably play them off stream and never again. And then these are 3 cards that just kind of felt a little bit weird to me. They kind of fit this category too of cards that are probably not good enough or kind of interesting, but maybe a little bit more powerful than that. Like Giora has a lot of interesting synergy with like Lotus Bloom and the Soul Ring that has Suspend, and is only 2 mana, is only 2 mana, and is like kind of like an Aether Vial for artifacts, which is a kind of card I've liked in the past. But being a 2 mana creature probably doesn't see any play. And then Danitha, Benalia's Hope, it does seem like very powerful cards like Eldrazi Conscription, Gigantification. It is 5 mana though, but you could also set up for like it's a legendary creature, so you could like a Goryo's Vengeance it and then bring back your Eldrazi Conscription or Gigantification and kill your opponent in one go sometimes. And then I thought Stin Paranoid Partition is a card worth bringing up because it's like a Baral or Goblin Electromancer, but for any card type besides creature or land, so it's a bit more versatile. Could fit in a different shell like Enchantress or but it doesn't make instants and sorceries cheaper, which is a bit tricky. But it also has the ability to protect itself, which is pretty powerful on a mana reducer. But these cards are really odd. They're really odd, so I put them in the Island of Misfits from this movie that I don't know the name of, but I thought it was a funny place to put them, and so they're here. That's all the cards that I thought were interesting to talk about in the context of Modern. I would say that this is a really above average number for a standard set. I'm really excited to start building decks with them, start playtesting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope to see you guys there. Let me know if there's any card that you thought was cool for Modern that I missed, and let me know if you have any thoughts on my thoughts on the cards. Thank you for watching until the end of the video.